Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition it's Donkey Kong Jr. Math, brought to us by Nintendo. Part of the original Black Box series of games, and has become the rarest or more expensive of all the Black Box titles, and was the only one that was part of the Education series. It is a very simplistic game where you're doing math as Donkey Kong Jr. There are 3 different modes, and we're going to look at each of the modes, starting with Calculate A. The game is always a 2-player game, but you can play easily by yourself just solving the math problems. In Calculate A, you start off at the number 0, and your goal is to get to the number that Donkey Kong has over his head. You do so by doing math problems. So for example, we're going to do 8 times 9 here in order to get the 72, then add an additional 2 to it in order to get 74. Whichever of the 2 Donkey Kong Juniors end up solving the problem first is the winner and gets an apple. The first to 5 apples is the winner of the game, and then it goes back to the main menu. Controls are very simple, of course, and very much like the original Donkey Kong Jr. game, where you're able to jump onto the vines or chains and then shimmy your way across. The hardest thing, of course, is making sure that you don't grab numbers that you don't want to grab, so you have to go in between numbers, and if for some reason you end up picking up the wrong symbol or wrong numbers, you can always clear your current number and start back at 0. I remember the very first time I ever played the game, I was a little bit confused about how it worked just because of the plus next to the number Donkey Kong was holding, and then I quickly realized that it meant that it was in the positive. As you do Calculate B mode, you usually have to deal with negative numbers, and because of that, the positive sign makes more sense in this version. And while you don't have a life count, you still can end up dropping down into the water below and end up having to kind of reset yourself. So that really is just going to come in play in the more hectic 2-player version. And surprisingly, while it's kind of dumb, doing a competitive game of Donkey Kong Jr. Math against a friend can be somewhat enjoyable. I really do find it humorous that after all the years of collecting NES, that the fact that this has become one of the more sought-after titles. I guess just sheerly for the fact they didn't make as many, and most kids were not going to pick this one off of the store shelf and put it in their collection. They'd rather have Mario or maybe even the regular Donkey Kong games before going after something like this. After getting the 5 apples, we go back to the main menu, and we're going to now go into Calculate B mode. Now for this one, instead of starting at 0, you start off at a random number, usually a negative number, and then your goal is to get a negative number that's equivalent to the one Donkey Kong is holding. Doing so is a little bit more complicated, in fact, maybe even a little bit more advanced than what you would think would be in a game like this, trying to figure out, of course, adding and subtracting and even multiplying and dividing a already negative number. The hardest thing about the Calculate B mode and what makes the game much longer, I feel like in this mode, is just the fact of trying to get to that very specific negative number when you're only able to use the 1 digit. You can't really use a lot of the multiplication or division once you get to a higher number, so usually we have to either subtract or add these very small digits over and over again. Every time a problem resets, all the numbers go random again in their location, and every time you use a number, it doesn't get replaced by the same number when it comes back. When each round starts, I think there is 2 of every number, or just about 2 of every number, and then once you end up grabbing one, of course, then it ends up being replaced by another random number. So a lot of times I'll need 9s or 8s, high numbers, and then I'll pick up a 9 and it'll get replaced with a 2 or a 3. Though, I will be honest, I haven't spent a ton of time practicing a game like this. It's just the stuff I've seen in the short amount of time I've been playing it. This is a good example now that we have to get to negative 568. We're going to have to add a whole bunch of numbers. So we're going to be grabbing that 9 and then running back over, grabbing another plus sign. I wish you only had to grab the symbols once, and then until you want to switch the symbols, then you could grab another one. So if I picked up the addition symbol, I could just leave it as that and then just keep grabbing numbers until I felt like switching it to whatever other one. But then again, what can you really expect from something like Donkey Kong Jr. Math? Though I would love a more in-depth discussion on why they created this game, why they only did one of the education games. Was it an experiment? I know there was a few other, like, I think similar kind of like programming and other stuff kind of things that were on the Famicom. I don't know if Nintendo did any other education games themselves for the Japanese Famicom. I know there were more educational titles on the NES, at least, with the Fisher-Price titles, and then later on the Mickey Safari and Letterland and Numberland and all those games. There was also the later on, like, Mario is Missing and Mario's Time Machine, Mario Teaches Typing, but all of those were done by, like, third-party companies that Nintendo licensed out the Mario character to, whereas opposed to, like, this was actually made in-house by Nintendo, so it's a real oddity as far as its creation is concerned. Here we're going to solve this one last math problem in this part of the game, the Calculate B mode, trying to get to 653, which is pretty easy for us to add everything together and slowly get up to that pretty big number. And then we're going to move on to the final type of mode, where you're able to solve more math equations of a few different types. You basically get to pick whatever type of math problem you want to solve, and then you have to go through 10 of that math problem in order to complete the mode. Once we're back to the main menu, we're going to go to the whole bunch of symbols exercise, which I guess is equation exercise, but here you go. You have all the different types of math possible problems, like simple division, simple multiplication, addition, subtraction, and then you pick whichever one you want, and then you go into the actual individual mode where you have all these chains set up, and as the higher you get up on the chain, the numbers change. So you start off at the bottom and then work your way up, and it goes up 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And your goal is to solve the math problem correctly, and then when you press either left or right on the D-pad after solving the problem, you drop off, and whatever that number is, if it's correct, you'll get one of the eggs from the birds on the left side. And your goal is just to get as high of a score as you can, and once you solve all 10 math problems, you then go back to the main menu. You can pick a different style of equation. So instead of kind of doing all of them, I just decided to do a pretty simple addition one here. Go through 10 problems of this to kind of show off the mode. I find that this mode is actually the more interesting overall as far as the edutainment part of it is concerned, because there is a good variety here as opposed to trying the more competitive play that was in Calculate A and B. Here you have a pretty decent amount of potential math problems to kind of learn, solve, and figure out. In fact, when I played the game years ago for the first time, I didn't even know this mode existed or how it actually worked, but I appreciate it more, I guess, now that it's actually in here, because I feel like it gives this title more depth than I thought it necessarily had at first. Sometimes you'll actually get 3 digits you'll have to solve in this particular problem, of course, because of the numbers that are ended up being used. But overall, this mode works and functions pretty well. Sometimes I accidentally screw up and get the wrong number because it's very little space on the chain, like only a couple of, like, pixels basically as you're moving up the chain between the numbers, so you want to make sure you always get the number, the exact one that you want, before switching over and before you officially solve the problem itself. It's also a pretty long trek to get Donkey Kong Jr. all the way over to the right side of the screen in order then to solve the problem. Thankfully, a very easy one here as we go into the last math problem in this mode, another one of the 3-digit ones, but pretty easy here, of course, to figure out. But thankfully, there is those increases, so if you want to test yourself out, boot up a game of Donkey Kong Jr. Math and play against a friend, and you may actually have a little bit of fun with it. But as we finish up this mode, it'll then go back to the main menu, and you could decide to start the game all over again if you wanted to. But with all of that said, that is going to wrap up this episode of Play It Through. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.